All right, thanks for joining us for Worldwide Slot Car Chat on Zoom, number 69, dude! I'm your host, Greg Gelb. Gang's all here. We got Frank, Wayne, Luff, John, Leo, Garth, Mike, Ed, Gaza, Don, Dennis, Jeremy, and other people. So we're going to talk slot cars again for the 69th time in the last year and a half. As normal, we start with some show and tell. I've got a little show and tell, but I'll let anybody who wants to go first. John's got his finger up. John, you go first.
I do. I actually have a related unboxing.
Ooh.
So, Dennis, your timing is impeccable because this came this morning.
Oh, yeah?
Is that an Area 71 3D printed thing?
No.
Oh, that's that's
I know what
different project.
I know what that is.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly, Frank. Frank, you're my next call. And again, for our friends. Oh, hang on, just to admit somebody here. For our friends down under, I brought the small knife.
That's not a knife.
See, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Jeez. Yeah, well, it's not like I got knife envy, right?
Yeah.
That's a nail cleaner, right?
Yeah,
Baby
exactly.
knife.
Is there any particular way to open this, Dennis? I imagine the top is the top, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember.
Okay, perfect. So we'll all learn together. Here we go.
Yeah, you just slip the sellotape carefully. That's it.
Yeah. Well, it's always up, right? Just like the surgeons in medieval days. There we go.
Up from the toes.
Yeah, exactly.
What I've got already, John.
What's that? Sorry. Oh, you're kidding. Oh, brilliant. Are those pedos?
No, I don't know whose they are. It's just a guy on eBay that sells them like for $4 or $5.
Geez.
And
Is he North America or whereabouts?
Huh? And then he even has the Cox stickers on it.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, here we go. So we open it up, and there's the prerequisite. Oh, nicely packaged, Dennis. Well done. I would expect nothing less, of course. Just keep that away from the cats. Oh, and look at, oh, that does look nice. That's Chaparral 2G.
Very nice.
The top looks really nice. I can see the mold marks there, but it's a slush cast. Has that's nice. Oh, goodness, he's got some nice holes in the vents.
Yeah.
The fender. I don't know if you can see that.
All right. So for the guys who want to know, this particular resin casting has been in my collection for maybe 10 years by now.
Oh, so it's degassed. That's perfect.
And it was made by a fellow by the name of John Dilworth, who I think we talked about him last week, right? He's a luthier.
Yes.
Okay. And so the car has now arrived with John Kit to be cloned, so that more than one of us can have one of these Chaparral 2Gs, seeing as there are basically no Chaparral 2Gs available in 1/32 scale anywhere.
Yeah, and the other thing too is it looks like it's really to scale.
Yeah, that's very scale.
That's really cool because
Yeah, it's very nice.
I love the slotted 2E, but it is a bit large.
Big. Yeah.
So what's the plan? John, what are you going to be doing with it?
Oh, well, the first thing I'm going to do is clean it up a wee bit because I can see where there's some resin that needs to be removed.
I mean, are you going to build it, or is Dennis, are you going to build the chassis? What's the plan with this body?
Let him finish.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, the first, to your point, the first thing is to actually make molds for all of the parts, and that they're robust enough. I should consult with folks here actually as far as mounting posts, because I can sort of put several mounting posts in a different areas that you can then remove if you're not using. So I don't know how many people want mounting posts in the front and the rear versus the side, for example. So that's something we might want to discuss. I see that there's a vacuum form windshield, and believe it or not, this probably will cast in clear quite nicely.
Good.
It'll need some trimming, but it will work. So that's great news. And then there are some other ancillary parts. The rear wing looks like it's in 3 pieces. Oh, right, and he cast. Oh yeah, he cast the metal supports right in the resin parts for the rear wing support. That's very clever.
Cool.
That's very cool. We can do that. Actually, I went to my local hobby shop today just to get to wire for this. So that can work out quite nicely. That's great. And oh, lovely cast. Well, this is gonna be fun. And oh, okay. I'll supply ferrules instead of the casting here. Okay, because ferrules will look a lot better on this, don't you think?
Well, the thing is, you don't need them because there's a scoop that goes over the top of them.
Oh, that's right. So
You
okay,
never
yeah.
see-
So I
you
can
never see the flared part.
Yeah, it is. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay, there are the tailpipes, and there's the. Good point, Dennis. Yeah, that'll say. You know what? You're right. You're right. That just goes on top like so.
I love
right?
it. Can I take a recording of that just for the times when my wife and me?
He said right.
Where he said, "You're right. You're right." 3 times in a row, he said, "Dennis,
Yeah, yeah.
you're
You're
right."
right, Dennis. You're right, Dennis.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Make that a ringtone. Brilliant. Oh, this is.
Anyway, so yeah, so for those who are asking, the idea is that we make a mold so that we can reproduce this, so that as many people who want a resin cast Chaparral 2G can have one.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And oh, I see the interior is also vacuum formed, but that I could do that in resin, no problem. I'll even provide a driver. That'd be good.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, no problem.
Cool.
No, this is lovely. Thank you very much, folks. We'll I of course got our Greg project working. That's in process. And my wife got me a die cast that I've been looking for that is actually, I should have brought it actually. It's a 1/32 scale Duetto spider, the graduate spider.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So I started to pull it apart and strip it. That'll be an episode. And then you just line all this stuff up, make the molds, and then just pour silicone. It's almost like living in LA.
Wait,
Almost like
you're in LA.
Yeah, like being a
Got a question, Ed?
cosmetic surgeon in LA. Yeah.
No, I was saying here in LA.
LA. Yeah, there's a bunch of LA people down there.
I'm 4 miles from downtown. I'm pretty much in LA.
Wow. Well, I just remember when I tried acting, they used to call it the city of Dow Corning.
Well, it is the most densely populated area in the United States, if not the world, anyway. So, bound to be a bunch of slaughters down there. Does anybody else have any show and tell they want to share?
Here, I have a transition from what you just shared connected to Dennis.
Then we'll go to Gary. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah.
It's a Saab.
Oh, a 96.
Right. Oh, can't hear you, Ed.
It's, your microphone is breaking up a little bit.
All right. Anyway, I'll just turn it over and show you.
That's better.
Yeah, it's on a Ninko chassis, and it is a resin body. And I have a one-to-one Saab that I drive around, so it's kind of nice to have
Condolences.
this. Yeah. So there it is.
That's
Very,
very nice. That
Very nice.
was a rally winner too, wasn't it, Ed?
Yeah,
yeah.
it was. Yeah.
Monte Carlo 850 with the 2-cycle.
Mine is a V4.
Which Ninko chassis did you use, Ed?
You know, I
Haley.
forget now which one this is. It may have been the
Looks like a Haley.
the Healy, I think. Austin Healy. Yeah.
Oh,
thanks for sharing that, Ed, and we'll definitely look forward to seeing paint going on there.
Oh, it is. It matches my car.
Very nice. That's cool. So it's already ready to go. It's already done.
Do you have the matching dent though?
I know. Don't.
That's an inside joke because poor old Eddie went to a car show over the weekend, and some guy in some honking great old Cadillac reversed into him and put a dent in the front fender.
I would not have wanted to be the
Guy
insurance.
in the honking red Cadillac.
No, he was a little embarrassed with all the cars
Little.
and coffee people watching him. Yeah.
Pleased
Well,
to hear
hopefully
that
that
he
gets
was
taken
embarrassed.
care of in a timely manner. What do you got to share, Gary?
Just the latest. I don't know if it's been up there or not yet. The latest XJS just come out from Sky
Electric?
Electric.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a Australia only release. Where is it? Got to get in the camera here.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah, nice representation. All
I
bar as I keep.
wonder why they've done it in Australia only.
Oh well, it won Bathurst in '85. Mainly think that only Australians would buy it because it was a Bathurst winner. There you go.
Oh, geez,
Well,
there's
and
a lot
don't
of
forget
people
that-
who know where Bathurst is.
Yeah. The
Plus,
only
I was gonna say
gripe
if they released it in North America, it would just depreciate like crazy.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting to see whether or not they bring out a 3-pack because it was a 3-car team that raced at Bathurst, 8, 9, and 10. Number 9 only lasted a couple of laps, had an accident on the first corner and smashed the headlight, and all the glass went through the air filter and straight into the motor, and it expired after a few laps. 8 was driven by Tom Walkinshaw and Win Percy, and they had a bit of problems through the race. They were losing a bit of oil and that. Managed to get third, but number 10 was John Goss, which was an Australian driver. Another reason why it was released in Australia. And it took the race quite easily. The only gripe I've got is they just buggered up the paintwork on the front there for some reason. The stripe doesn't go all the way across, goes all the way across here on the front stripe, whereas on the real car it follows the body panel line at the front there. So I don't know how they can mess that thing up. If seeing as though it's a British car and it's made by a British company, you would think that would be one of the details that the 14-year-olds that are doing all this sort of stuff would pick up on.
They had an intern doing it.
Yeah, exactly. But otherwise, it's quite nice. Goes quite well on the track. It's nothing spectacular. I've actually lowered this one because they were sitting up about 3 mil too high on the front, so I lowered the front down. It's very nice. It's good to see that they're building something different. They've brought out a couple other models as well, the European one and a police one, of course. You had to have the police car, just so because they're making the mold. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of different XJSs run and produced over the next couple of years.
What it wasn't a TV show as well. Was it The Pretenders or something? Or I can't remember.
Yeah.
The Professionals.
Professional. That was it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there was one in that, and Persuaders had the Dino and the Vanquish, I think it was.
That's right. Yeah, it was a banquet. You're right. Yeah. Now, while we're on the subject of television shows, I see that Neil has picked someone's favorite track as a background.
He's teasing Dewan.
Yes. Yeah, I would like to have made that track too, but that table's pretty wide.
That's huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what you can do when you live on a movie set.
Yeah, and have an unlimited budget.
16 by 20. Just look how big they are compared to the track. I mean, they look like little tiny things standing there.
Yeah.
That's how big that table is. That's huge.
You could have made the second one. They made a second track as well for Batman.
That's right. It was the first time they did it, which was on the Shane episode. That's right.
Yeah, it's a little small one.
And the Manta Ray was also in that episode. That was the car that Shane steals.
I mean, Dewan's current layout is to that right now. So
I want to give my props out to John. Last week he provided me. Looks like I'm getting some feedback. Sorry about that, gentlemen. He provided me with some still images from Model Car Magazine, and it actually allowed me to fine tune. Because if you notice in the track that Neil has in the background there, right in front of Alfred, you can't tell that there's 2 chicanes, and I never knew that until I saw the still shot. So it actually changed my whole design. I mean, it just updated my design and corrected it. And I actually did have a show and tell too. I ran into another gentleman on another, I guess, forum, And I was actually missing half straight. One of the half straights is a real special piece. Actually, anyway, we ended up exchanging because I had 5 of the half curves. Those are the 2 rarest pieces that that are out for Revell track. It's the half straight, which this is, and the half curve. I had 5 of the half curves. I only needed 4. I only had 3 of the half straights. I was looking for that last one. I was actually going to manufacture a half straight if I needed to, but I traded with him my half curve for a half straight. And I'm trying to make sure I can do this show and tell real quick.
By the way, Dewan, I love that packaging. It's so cool.
Oh yeah, but you know what? They have a price on here. $1.50 is what this
What a
thing
ripoff.
you pay for this. You know what it's going for right now? You can't get it for less than $50, but the average price is about 100.
Wow.
Yeah, that stuff does better than your 401k, doesn't it?
Okay.
I turned sharing on, so you should be able to share if you want to.
Okay, let's try that one more time. And I want to share my original photo. I don't know what you guys are seeing. Are you seeing the photo? Oh,
That's the half turn.
Yep.
that's what?
That's the half turn.
Oh, it is great. Okay, so you are seeing that. So that's
Yep.
the original condition of the half turn. And I went through a process. Let's see if I can do it.
Wow.
My cleaning process that I go through, because when I didn't want to give him something that was looking kind of,
Secondhand.
55-year-oldish. So this is my process. I just take a little burgundy 3M pad and a detail brush, and that's all I did with the top was that. And then from there, the top and bottom.
Oh, that's magic. That's magic.
And
Here
then,
it is.
Then you go and use one of the Mr. Clean Magic Erasers. That's what's at the top there. And then the final, I think I just wrote the final. How do I get to the final? Let me get to that. Oh, that's what John gave me. Let's see. How do let's do it this way. The final version. Go back to screen share and share the right page then. And do the next one.
That really is an amazing job, Dewan. It looks like better than new.
Yeah, so that's the final touch up right there.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really nice.
So I like to have them side by side. And I started running to more and more people on the different forums that are just old Revell enthusiasts like myself. And so I probably, like I said, I have about a little over 2,000 pieces of track. And I've been able to bring most of the track. We started with this one, I would consider about a C- grade or C+ grade, C to C- grade rather, and brought it up to what I consider an A-, almost a straight A grade.
Well, it's amazing that the plastic doesn't appear to be cracked in any spots.
No, yeah. And but this one isn't the best one. It actually has a broken tab. If you look in the center on the left-hand side, you see that the tip of the right at the center there is a tab.
Oh yeah, I would not have noticed that.
Yeah, so it's functionally going to be acceptable. But anyway, after that, I'll stop the sharing here real quick. And then he gave me.
What's Revell
like
rail made out of? Is it just regular
stainless steel? Stainless steel.
Oh, it's stainless. Okay.
Now this is what he sent me. He sent me in the packaging. And this is just an amazing condition. I don't know if you can see you probably can't see how shiny and
Oh yeah.
This was manufactured more than 55 years ago. They stopped making it. They stopped their entire run of all manufacturing in 1970. That's when they stopped their manufacturing. So that's 50 years ago. 51 years ago, but they stopped probably this one about 4 or 5 years earlier. This is just exceptionally good condition, brand new, never been touched. So that's what we traded. I gave him my curve, half curve, and he gave me a half straight. But by the same token, I could have made my half straight. I made some custom straights. These are what I could. These are 1/3 straights. So I made these myself. So those are 6 inches. These are 4-inch straights, and just putting them together. But having the original is better than anything else, you know. And again, I want to thank John for updating my design, and I'm getting so much closer. I'm just waiting for the city to approve my plans so that I can start building out. And once I get it built out, I'm going to definitely open it up to people to come and invite to just run on that track.
Listen, I'm just so pleased that, as my wife calls it, my 60s archive of trivia is paying off.
Yeah, that was so cool. But yeah, he gave me that the screenshots, and that was just phenomenal. I wasn't even, I never was aware of it.
So that's the picture that Gary shared in the chat of his Jaguar. There. Apparently, you also shared a video. I'm not going to try to share that to the group, but there's a link to a video file that Gary shared of the Batman and Robin track. I'm guessing it's the same video that.
No, it's the other one. It's a small track.
Oh,
it's a video. Oh, it's a clip from the show with the small track. Okay.
Small track, yeah. The other link I sent you there was I posted a thing up on RevoSlot on the forum that I'm on, all about the Chaparral cars, and it's all the plans and all that people had made over the years from the 60s and all that made the 3D, made the small wooden ones you make yourself and everything else. So there's a lot of plans and a lot of photos and all that on all the different Chaparrals I could find.
Yeah.
So it's just a link that I put on there in one of the part of the forum there.
All right, I'll make sure that's in the video description when I put this up on YouTube.
So now we just have to put Batman in a chaparral.
Robin. Oh yeah, get Robin. There's Robin.
I'm going to go ahead and do my share real quick. I got a new car very recently. You guys have seen this before.
It's the blue and gold. Oh yeah, there.
The new RevoSlot blue coral. Couldn't pass that one up. And yes, I've already ordered one of the RevoSlot F40s that's blue and yellow that's coming out. And yes, I've just confirm with everybody, I've already ordered the Pioneer Legends, the Sunoco Pioneer Legends. Those are on their way once they hit Electric Dreams. But there's the other side, and this is my RevoSlot blue and yellow car collection.
Oh, wow.
The 42 is original Porsche white kit done by Alan's daughter. Very good car painter person. And then of course those are all stock RevoSlot cars. Soon
Where did you get the RevoSlot GT1?
I order all my RevoSlots from Alan at 132slotcar.us because he carries those. The blue coral one is pretty smooth. I haven't slung it around the track, but when I put a battery to the braids, it's a whole lot better gear mesh than the others. To anybody who's done tuning to these cars, which I have not, other than replacing tires, are the screws Loctited in? Because I tried to turn one of the screws and I could not. I'm gonna have to get a better screwdriver or something because I could not release this because the front wheels don't spin very long at all. Like I spin them hard and they spin down in like 1 second, even with lubrication, and they're not pinched, right? So it's not a lubrication issue. It's not that they're pinched too hard. I'm thinking that the axle brackets are not perfectly aligned. So I wanted to loosen those screws up and I couldn't.
Yeah, you need a good screwdriver with a really good point and a bigger handle.
Yep.
Not looking forward to that. But I definitely want to get that car going around the track nicely.
Spraddle go.
So my other thing is a tell, and yeah, I heard Chris's voice, so I see his name there. So you guys might find this interesting. Night before last at Analog Club races. We're racing the NSR Classics right now, and I have the Mark IV, the GT40 Mark IV on because it's blue and yellow camel livery. And I've been having chatter problems, and I almost never have this much chatter from an NSR. I know the chassis are somewhat flexible, but generally I don't have this much chatter. And I'm having to just baby it the whole time. You know, I couldn't even dial the chatter out of it by turning all the knobs in the opposite ways on my controller to reduce the torque and all that stuff. I couldn't get it out. I had to bring up the throttle slowly and go into the turns and go around the turns slowly and everything. And on Monday night, I was kind of lamenting this issue. Everybody else is running P68s. And the last time we ran NSR Classics, I also ran a P68, and it was a class leader. It was a fantastic car. No surprise, everybody's running P68s now. But I didn't want to run my P68 again, so I got the Mark IV, and I'm like, what is the deal with this car? And I was like, well, according to the spec, we couldn't put in weight, we couldn't coat the front tires. You know, we can true and glue the tires all around, but we can't coat the fronts. And I'm like kind of complaining about that. And I was apparently looking at the wrong spec. We were allowed to add weight. We still couldn't coat the front tires, but we can add weight. So I'm like, okay, well, where do I add weight? My normal place for adding weight is up front to reduce wheeling out when my tires are nice and grippy. So that's where I put the weight, right under the front axle, little 7-gram chunk of lead. As I'm sure you guys have already figured out, that didn't help at all with the chatter. And it was the same, if not maybe a little bit worse, but definitely not any better. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, maybe something is not flat, right? So I figured when I get home, I'm gonna go ahead and strip it completely down and put it on a setup block and see if it's not flat and do all that nonsense. And while watching the other guys racing their P68s around, I was chatting with one of the guys, and he was like, I don't understand why the P68s are such great cars, because they have that long tail. They're such long cars. And I'm like, well, it's got a short wheelbase, but you're right, that's a really long car. And then the light finally went on, and I remembered what you guys had been telling us about, you know, don't add weight until you absolutely have to, and then, but if you add weight in the back, you're not actually increasing traction, you're increasing the pendulum effect. So I'm like, well, maybe that's why the P68s are doing so well, because they have that extra bit hanging way out the back end. What if I move the weight to the back end? So I spent, you know, the next few minutes taking my car back apart and moving the weight from out under the front axle to right under the back axle. And it was absolutely night and day. No surprises to some of you guys, but I was just flabbergasted because, you know, you guys say it so often, but I'm still, you know, my head is like, you know, if you put extra weight in the back, then you're just going to increase traction and it's going to want to wheel you out and blah, blah, blah. But it was a dream. It was like the chatter was completely gone. I was slanging that thing around the track like nobody's business. And just, yeah, that's the end of I call these Greg stories because they don't really have an ending. They just kind of stop.
Well, that's a happy ending. Yeah.
I call it a happy ending. And at this point, I'm not even sure I'm going to bother stripping it down to see if anything is out of whack, because it was running so great. You know, my tires were dirty because this was at the end of the night. I have a feeling that once I get fresh tires back on that thing, I'll be out in the lead rather than trailing the end.
Yeah, it's not broke, don't fix it.
And it was broke, and I fixed it.
But I mean, yeah, but afterwards.
Yeah.
If you want to play some
Dennis?
games, Greg,
Hold on, Chris, what were you going to say?
if you want to mess around a bit, I would try taking little bits of weight out of the back until it chatters, and then put a little bit more back in. If you can get away with a little bit less weight back there and not chattering, overall, you're going to be better.
That is a good idea. And just to kind of give me some guidance on that, I'm using one of those square bits of wheel balancing weights, a 7-gram square of lead. Would you like quarter it and then go a quarter at a time, or would you go even less than that?
No, just try. I mean, I really don't like those things for wheel, like I prefer slot car lead. But that's-
I've got some sheet lead too, so I can cut little
try,
sheets.
I mean, try a half a piece, like a half a piece. If you get chatter, you got to go back the other way. But I mean, in a perfect world, the lightest car you can get away with that does what you want it to do, you're going to be better off.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even want to add weight until it felt like there was no other solution.
Well, you could try it without any weight in it at all, because the weight up the front.
That's how I
isn't a
had
good
been
idea.
racing it from the start.
Yeah, and was it chattering like that?
It had chattered from the very first race.
No, then you need
Can
it.
you-
Or take the podder.
Yeah, you can tighten up the pod a little bit, or put some of those silicone washers between the pod and the chassis. I don't know what your rules are.
They're pretty restrictive, and I'll just kind of go back in time a little bit. I had raced the car in the past as well, and the previous spec was the one that said you couldn't add any weight, and I don't remember it chattering so bad.
Yep.
That time around. So after the first race this time around, and it was chattering all over the place, I'm like, well, maybe the tires need to be retrued. So the first thing I did was pop them back on the machine, take off the, a thou or whatever it was. They're nice and true again. And I still didn't add any weight because I was kind of hoping that's what the issue was.
Mhm.
And on the first night when I was doing all that chattering, I'm like, okay, well, let's try some different screw settings, right? So I tightened them all down and it was still chattering. I only loosened the pod a little bit and it was still chattering. I tightened the pod and loosened the body a little bit and it was still chattering. And I couldn't, there was no chattering setting that I could find for the screws. I'm not an expert screw tuner, but I couldn't find something. And the night before last, after I did the tire retruing and it was still chattering, that's when I said, okay, well, now I'll go ahead and add some weight. Put it up front, was no better. Put it in the back, and it was so much better. So now I'm going to go back and, like you said, reduce some of that weight until it chatters again, and then put it back on until it stops.
Do you have?
We can't do the silicone washers, and we can't do very much at all.
What tires are you running?
Stock super grips.
Okay. Do you have a pretty nice radius on the inside and the outside of the sidewalls?
They look radiused to my eyes, but
Okay, well, yeah, unless they're pretty squarish.
Yeah, they're not square.
Okay, you're fine. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty much the tires that came on it, except glued and trued.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't even bother trying to radius them because they didn't look square. So
that's fine. That's fine. If you can, I've got a little bit of a show and tell, if that's okay.
please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Greg, it's a pity Alan isn't here, because his recommendation would probably have been to drink heavily the night before the race.
That doesn't help. I got to drive home from those. When they race at my house, that's when I drink heavily, and I usually am worse for it. But as far as what else we can do, there's very little else that can be done to the cars. You've pretty much heard everything that can be done. The only thing that I haven't done is switch the stock screws out, which are those nasty wood screw type, self-tapping things, with some of the brass tuner screws.
Okay.
So maybe I'll do that. I don't know.
So before we leave that topic behind completely, is there any technical explanation as to how adding weight underneath the rear axle could have stopped the chatter?
I still don't understand it completely, so I'm ready to listen.
Well, consider the car as it goes into a turn, right? The car approaches the turn, and the guide hits the side of the slot and moves to the left or right. Okay, but the center of gravity of the car is well behind the guide. So at the beginning of the turn, the center of gravity is still traveling straight forward, right? And so it carries the back of the car around. Now, the more weight you have at the back, the easier that movement is going to slide the tire rather than chatter or get the tire to grip, because you are looking at a bigger, as Greg said, a bigger pendulum effect. remember that when if you're thinking about, don't think about the vertical forces and the friction, think about the sideways forces that are on the car at the time.
Yeah.
And so basically, as you put more weight at the rear, it helps the rear to slide. And that's all that it is. And that's why it gets rid of the chatter.
Yep.
I think probably
Can I
one
add
of the reasons
something?
I didn't go immediately to that is that the chatter doesn't happen going into the turn. It's pretty much always coming out of the turn. So I was waiting until the car was completely straight before I would hit it, and it would still chatter, which is why I was thinking maybe it's a flex issue. It was like Ninko hop, but I can't stiffen anything. So
you have to, there's two things that can happen is corner chatter, and then there's also tramping when you come out of the corner and hit the gas.
okay, I think that's mainly what I was having was the tramping.
Yeah, tramping is a lack of longitudinal, not enough strength in the longitudinal flex of the chassis. So that just lets the chassis just flex and bounce, and the tires grab and let go and grab and let go. So you need to go back and really look at what's happening, because they manifest themselves at the same, they look the same, but they're total, one's mid corner and one's under acceleration coming out of the corner. And it's two different fixes.
Well, that's why I was surprised. I think that's probably why I didn't go straight for the lead in the back, and I was so surprised that it had such a beneficial effect, because it was tramping, and I can't do anything to stiffen, and I tried, screwed everything tight and loose and various things like that, but it was the weight that did it.
Yep. Yeah.
And maybe it'll be different, because this was at the end of the night too, and we can't clean tires between heats. So I had clean tires at the first, and then it was just dirtier and dirtier all night long. So probably that has something to do with it. So when I get clean tires again, maybe the weight won't have done diddly squat.
Well, check it out. I mean, if adding weight to the front of a chassis that tramps is a disaster, because it's just not going to work out very well for you at all.
Didn't help, that's for sure.
I will, if you can, if you're ever allowed to do any modifications. Is that up?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
This little axle tube on the back.
Yeah.
Slot Car Corner carries these now. They're made by Slotting Plus.
Yeah, and the night that I was truing the tires up, I'm like, I got a bunch of those axle shims. I bet I could fill that spot with enough shims to do that, but that's absolutely not allowed.
Yeah, well, the shims don't do anything.
Yeah.
This is a solid tube with 2 bushings installed, and it stops independent flexing of the axle uprights, which is not a good thing for gear mesh handling and all kinds of things. So, but if I filled that space with with enough shims to basically do the same purpose, right? I'm talking about the big ones that they put on the outside between the bushing and the wheel usually. Well, what are you running, an angle winder or a side winder?
It looks like that.
Okay, you're not going to have enough room between the back edge of the can and the front edge of the axle.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That on this tube is a solid tube when you buy them. And I've had to cut out a piece of the tube to expose the axle to get clearance. I didn't even have enough clearance with this on the sidewinder. So
that shows that I didn't even try it, because if I had tried it, I would have discovered that immediately. Oh, it doesn't go back in.
So then, Greg, here's a way you could probably approach it. If you are allowed to apply lead, then you are more than likely also allowed to glue that lead in. So why not put a piece at both vertical uprights where the pod changes angle, glue it to not only the bottom but the side, and then the lead will reinforce the walls of the axle of the bush holders.
Some creative lead application. That would be I could probably skim under the rules with that one.
I've skimmed under the rule with that one once or twice too.
Yeah.
No, not Dennis.
Oh yeah, damn straight. There is a
Dennis-
far out rule too.
You'd
Dennis
probably-
and
Need to be lead.
I wouldn't.
Dennis,
I
have you
wouldn't
ever
use
shared the
this
hard
plastic
bodies?
shit. Lead's just gonna bend all over the place.
I was gonna say that and if I were to do that, I would probably use shoe goo, and there's nothing stiff in the lead or the shoe goo, so.
Yeah, well, little blocks of lead, and you're not going to bend, are they? Like you're using
Yeah,
the
but then
counterweight.
but then I'd hit that 10-gram limit pretty quick.
Sorry, Ed, what were you about to say, Ed? Sorry.
Yeah, I wondered if Dennis or Frank, have you shared your hard body chassis at all to show how we add brass weight behind the rear axle to offset the height that takes away chatter as well?
Oh,
It
yeah.
helps the cars to
I
slide.
don't think I might have shown some at some point, but I don't remember.
Yeah,
I'll see
maybe
if I
I'll
can
bring
dig
bring
up
some one of these times
dig one
and
up.
show. But it's
Be right
pretty
back.
routine. Yeah. Frank, do you have something there?
Yeah.
He's gonna go get one, apparently.
Yeah, because it's pretty routine for all of us to build these chassis or add a brass plate behind the rear axle to really help take away chatter and help them to slide, which is usually caused by the high center of gravity because of the hard plastic bodies.
Oh yeah, I mean, if this were anything other than your box stock, with very limited options for tuning kind of thing, I'd be trying all kinds of stuff. I can't do any of this kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's even a small plate, really. We
Yeah,
put
okay,
some
yeah,
big
that's a
ones.
small one.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a small one. If you
We put them way back where that plastic is.
Yeah, Frank's chassis looks like it's a Porsche with that big wad of brass hanging out the end.
Yeah.
that's how we do it out at Wayne Park
Yeah.
in the hard body racing.
Yeah. Turn it around, Frank, upside down. Yeah, like that. And up. There we go.
How about there?
So what,
Yeah.
what you're really creating is a high rear polar moment of inertia.
Well, a higher polar moment for period.
Right. Yeah.
I wish I could take credit for this chassis because it's so pretty, but if I did not do this chassis, Marco Chaparral did it.
Do you have lead on the left side of that?
Yeah, we have this very big left-handed donut turn on that track. So you weight the inside so you can get around that donut, because on some of the lanes, the donut is longer than the straightaway.
Oh, BRM.
Well, BRM body.
Yeah, BRM body. Yeah. So I'm reminded of a funny thing. So last week we raced on a track where the host likes to do fuel. So you got to stop under the light bridge and let the software trigger a fuel, and then you wait until you're fueled up and then you go again. But the problem is that some of the cars have an opening, like through the windshield, through holes in the chassis. And if you happen to stop in that spot, then the software doesn't register that you're under the light. So what they decided to do before we did the race was put a little piece of tape under the hole in the pod to basically block that hole. And then later on in the evening, as we were all packing up, I noticed one of the guys had strategically placed his tape so that it covered the hole, but it also went to the chassis as well as across the pod. I'm like, technically that's within the rules because we're putting tape on, but you know exactly what you're doing, dude. You know exactly what you're doing.
I didn't know that my clone was racing up there. Yeah, I would have done that for sure.
Can I ask what benefit you get from? I've seen people put tape across their pods like that, but I just don't know what the benefit is.
I'll let one person hit that one.
It dampens the vibrations.
Right.
It's like shock absorber, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, like with NSR cars, do you guys just lock the pods down and then also put tape, or do you just lock it down?
You don't want to lock it down and then tape. If you lock it down, then it doesn't help to tape it.
Okay, so you back it off so it's got a little play in it, but then you put the tape on it, and it just kind of is a shock absorber. The tape becomes okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay,
just to control the motion.
Gotcha.
You can certainly use the silicone washers that are out now, Jeremy, between the bottom of the pod lug and the top of the chassis plate. that essentially does the same thing, but it doesn't fatigue over time, and you don't run the risk of the tape coming off or catching a bit of the track and stuff like that. So,
Okay, yeah, I'll buy more of those.
And some clubs, the rules are that you can't tape or any tape's got to be on top of the chassis, and that becomes difficult.
Yeah.
And isn't it more or less the same reason that some manufacturers offer springs for the pods?
Yes.
Isn't that the same purpose? Yeah. So you got spring suspension, you got the washers to dampen, and tape has been the thing until the springs and the washers and stuff like that. So
what kind of tape? Just like a regular duct tape or
well, it depends.
box tape?
It depends on what you want to do, because different tapes have different effect.
Right.
Hold that up again.
You can try different ones.
That's the strapping tape with the string in it?
Sometimes, yeah, filament tape is one type of thing. I wouldn't use duct tape because it's too thick.
Okay.
So
Drag on
filament
the
tape like that. I've seen guys use regular masking tape. I use a lot of the black electrical insulation tape because I like that on 1/32 scale cars. There are medical tapes that you can get at the pharmacy that work pretty well if you want a soft damping. So you can play
I'll
with
experiment a little, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the tape is going to change how it dampens, right? So you might find the first tape you try doesn't feel good, so then try a different tape, you know.
And the filaments.
Try hockey tape.
Yeah, and the type of filaments in the type of filament in the tape makes a difference as well.
Yeah.
And whether you have that oriented across the chassis or along the chassis.
Yeah.
Can I finish? I've got to run fairly soon, and I just wanted to show everybody a couple little bits and pieces that have just come out. If that's okay.
Please, go ahead.
That up?
Ferrules?
Okay. These are bits and pieces that Mr. Ernie Mazzetti has just made to retrofit on his Patriot Evolution 1/32 scale metal chassis car. Initially, that car came out with folded metal uprights, so you could not adjust the front axle height. So he's done a new plate with little holes in it, and he's made these really cool little Delrin uprights. These are very similar to the axle blocks that Slot Car Corner used to sell, the adjustable axle blocks. They are drilled underneath, and you can't really see them, but there's a couple little screws. The cool thing is that they came with some bushings. I've been playing around with these for a while. They were going to be sold as an upgrade for the chassis kit, but I've been using them in different cars. So I went up to see him today and said, you know, we should package these as separate kits. So this kit can be used for scratch builders, for anybody who wants to retrofit a plastic car with non-adjustable axle blocks. There's little bushings made. The bushings slide into the axle block holders. There's a grub screw on the top and a grub screw on the bottom. The nice thing about this is the grub screws locate the bushings, not the axle. So if you do not have perfect edges on the edges of your grub screws, you can score your axles. You can also get a little bit of friction. So then I've been playing around with these bushings, trying to use these separate bushings by themselves. And these will be at Slot Car 132 US. They'll be at Slot Car Corner. They'll be at Professor Motor and somewhere else. And forgive me, I forgot the name. Anyway, what the bushings by themselves are extremely cool for is this. Okay, you stopped me, Greg. I can't screen share here.
You should be able to try again. There you go.
Okay. This is a bog stock NSR chassis. I could have used a slotted chassis, a scale auto chassis, whatever I wanted to use here. One of the issues with a lot of the plastic chassis is the channels that they cut to put the axle through are often too wide front to rear. So you get a lot of slop in the axle, a lot of axle steering, which tends to oscillate your car going down the straights, and it's not the hot tip for going around corners. So these little bushings fit in with a couple of file strokes to slotted chassis, scale auto chassis. So you can see, you can just see the edge there, but you can see it just protruding by the upright here. So now I can use a grub screw on the top and a grub screw on the bottom to vertically position my axle without the grub screws touching the axle. And the biggest thing is I stop these axles from oscillating back and forth. So it's a much more consistent performance and a much smoother car if you do that. So not for everybody, I understand, but if you're looking for little bits and pieces and your rules do allow, these bushings and all these little bits and pieces should be on the market in a week or so. I just packaged these up this morning, and Ernie just made part numbers because he never thought about selling the stuff as separate bits. So cool little gubbins and nubbins and stuff that are out there if you're looking for that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Awesome.
Can I ask a question? How long are those bushings, Chris? 3 mil, 4 mil?
No,
Sorry?
a little longer than that.
3 or 4 millimeters, maybe 5?
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I have not measured them, but they're just proud of an NSR upright block.
Hmm. Do you think they introduce any potential for alignment issues?
Sorry?
Do you think they introduce any potential for alignment issues with them being as long as they are?
No, not at all. Why?
I just thought that because they're so long, that they might be, when they're trapped between vertical grub screws, they might be able to skew.
Well, I mean, when you say, you know, the important grub screws in a 1/32 scale plastic car are the top ones.
Yeah.
The bottom ones are just basically along for the ride. So if you leave the bottom ones just a tiny snick loose, the bushing can move around. I've done a bunch of them and I've had 0 issues so far.
Good.
I saw Brian sharing something. Brian, you want to turn your camera back on and unmute yourself and tell us what you're talking about?
This is a chassis I've been working on, and Chris made me think of this. I don't know if you can tell from the front there, but I did something similar, but what I used was slotted spherical bearings.
Yep.
So I just made the holes there, and they dropped right in. They slot through the chassis. Again, I have really...
That's a really nice rag you got there.
Thank you.
There we go.
And it did eliminate pretty much all of the front to back movement on this at all.
Yeah.
I haven't installed the grub screws on this one yet. And I kind of ride at the top on this particular car I'm building anyway.
That's fine.
But it worked real well. I just printed this. This is a chassis I designed and built, and I did the same thing. I used the spherical bearings from a slotted chassis.
Yep.
And it works real nice. I've got some 2 mil grub screws or some tiny grub screws coming for the top. On this particular car, I don't need them. I mean, I actually had to make these O-ring type wheels because of the way I've got the front end designed. I can't fit a regular wheel in there.
So Brian, did you actually print those front wheels?
Yes, I did.
They look great.
Yeah.
It's like the whole thing's printed other than the motor and the axles and the, and the guide, pretty much everything, right?
Yeah, pretty much. The guide's an NSR. It's got the slotted screws, slotted crown. I got a plastic pinion on it right now, but I've got another one coming. But yeah, pretty much I've done everything.
You got that big tungsten weight there under the motor. I like it.
That's an 8mm magnet, actually. And,
What do you use this? Do you hold notes onto your fridge with this car, or why do you have a magnet?
Exactly. I stick the whole thing on there, and actually, the way I designed this, I can show you another one here. I can actually tune this magnet because I can slide it in and out. You can see I can recess it.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's got a lip to keep it from going all the way out.
Actually, I can come about a 1/2 mil proud with it.
Doesn't
I
it?
bet you could take
So
it all
now-
the way out,
How does
too,
it-
right?
How does it stay in the chassis?
It's tight. And once you get it set, a couple drops of super glue and it will stay. And this one's got less downforce on it right now than my slotteds do.
Yeah.
And the car flies. It's a little overmotored. That's a 25K Predator in it. So it's a little bit, and the thing weighs nothing. I bet I haven't weighed it yet, but it's quite light. Nice little bit of body float on it. No, again,
Brian,
no
does the motor snap in, or does it screw in?
Yes. Here's a previous one, an earlier version. So I've got motor screws in the back, and it does snap in on the front.
You need to buy some Larry Shinoda bodies there.
Well, it's funny you say that because this is what this was kind of inspired by.
Well, it's
The
you're
I
locked
think it's
into
very cool.
1968 here, boy.
Well, now this one was actually the one I was going to do, but believe it or not, you notice there's no vents on the back here. When I pulled it out of the printer, there was a big gaping hole right here. And I'm like, what the hell? I've printed this body about 4 times. I've never had that issue.
Mm.
And as I was pulling the support, I found a fly in it. So a fly had somehow actually gotten inside the printer and ended up in my print.
That's awesome.
So this one was the second print. This is what it's supposed to look like.
So this is a fly slot now.
This is
The
it.
fly car.
That explains why it absolutely flies on the track.
There's a bug in the print.
This was actually inspired by the Shinoda dagger. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that one. It's been around a while. So that's about as far as my skills will take me on a CAD program. This does not been touched. This is right out of the printer.
That's a lovely design.
The little dimples there are supports. Those will sand right off.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Brian, again, is this a resin print?
Yes.
Okay. So that's why it looks so good. I mean, it looks almost finished.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, there's no primer or anything on this yet.
That's
So-
very, very cool. Very
But
cool.
it's funny, Chris says I'm stuck in 1968. See, when I was a kid, my dad wasn't so much of a race fan, but he was in the hobby business. He worked for AMT and MPC both. And that's what slot cars looked like to me when I was a kid. I mean, other than the intro stuff we raced, this is what the big slot cars looked like.
Well, there's more thingies were sold than any other scale-looking car. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I like them. I'd like to do a version of the Asp. That's a favorite of mine as well. So
one
let me see
of the most hideous slot cars ever made.
the way it performed, or just the way it looked.
It had that stupid little flexible aluminum 5 thou thick motor box at the back of it that was just absolutely brutal.
Yeah, but a couple magnets fix that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And I also I saw a recent. I don't know how recent a post it was. You had actually restored a thing for some guy, Chris. It was I believe it was a lime metallic green. It was the one where all 4 wheels were like covered.
That was the classic Astro V.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it was a guy in Western Canada who wanted it restored, so he sent it to me and I sent it back to him and he was rather pleased.
Yeah, it was a nice restoration. It was very, very nice. It kind of inspired me, if you will. So I'm blaming you for all of this.
Well, it's clearly my fault.
Well, man of you to step up.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. I look forward to more of your designs and 3D printing stuff. Are you planning on sharing with the 3D printing world, or keeping it all to yourself, or?
Now, when I get it all perfected, I'll make it available if anybody wants one. Yeah, it's been a lot. I printed a few of these chassis. I've got about 5 of them sitting in front of me now. I have a Sidewinder version of it as well. So
Is your what's your resin printer? Is it a Mars or Mars 2 or what? What do you got?
I have a Creality 200. I'd like to go to Mars 2 Pro, cut the print time in half. That body's a 5.5, 6 hour print.
Yeah.
New printer will cut down to 2.5.
I was wondering about your build size. Is it the same as a Mars?
It's just a little smaller. That body just barely fits on that plate. I gotta tilt that at about 15 degrees.
Yeah.
Kind of want anyways, just for print quality. But I'm happy. I'm enjoying it. Like I said, I did there's a Sidewinder version of that too.
Nice.
That's really cool.
Now this one I made so you could just snap in your bearings, bushings on the back, and glued. This one is actually using pressed on. That I made the whole solid, so I pressed them in.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do both because I'm trying to make it where you can utilize, like, this is the rear axle off a Fly Viper. I build the chassis where I can literally just snap that right thing in, and your junk spare parts become extra cars. It was kind of the thought. So,
are you using standard resins, or are you starting to mix in some flexibles or anything, or ABS like, or?
This is strictly ABS like, and so far it's been pretty good. This one's hit the floor about 4 times, and I just managed to put a little crack right there in that corner.
Nice.
So, but I've actually got it. What really made the car sweet is I went to a smaller rear diameter tire. I went down from a 20 to an 18, and it just kind of lowered the whole chassis. And I was actually moved the magnet up higher and gave it less magnetic downforce, and the car runs even better.
Yeah.
So this is kind of my crash test dummy here. And once I figure out all the weak points, I'll reinforce that other one before I paint it.
If you feel the need for speed, Brian, where you have your little body mount tabs molded into the chassis, you could put a small magnet where your main rails come on either side, so that when the main magnet steps off of the rails, you pick up the effect from the little one as it slides.
Yeah, because as it slides, the middle one will let go, but then you can have outrigger magnet.
And it lets go too suddenly, so if you put some tweakers on the outside and couple up the front, you could just have it full blast.
Yeah, the way it is now, I'd still get some slide out of it.
Yep.
So, like, I don't like them to snap loose when they break loose. So, yeah, I like to run magnets, but I don't want it to the point where I can just pin the throttle and go. Yeah. You still got to drive the car. The car will slide, especially once the tires start getting a little mucky. So it's a nice compromise.
Well, that's maybe an experiment to try a few little tweaker magnets in a row back there, so that you don't have quite as much downforce in total, but you have more consistent downforce as the car slides, so you don't reach a point where all of a sudden the magnet's off the rails and your car is just into the weeds.
Well, Chris, would a weaker bar magnet work for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the same thing.
That's why isn't that why they develop those step magnets? Like, they're real thin in the middle, and then they get bigger and then bigger for like F1 cars.
But they're not that much. They're not real wide. They're not really wider than the rails. I remember a car that Russell Sheldon built a few years ago, a magnet car. And he had big disc magnets outwards on the pans, so that when the car slid around, you didn't lose magnetic downforce on the whole thing. It just looked great. I don't know how it went, but it looked gorgeous.
Or if you want a real challenge, take a magnet off an old Skeletrix car from the 90s.
Yeah.
The brown ones.
Well, part of my reason for using the button magnet here is I didn't want to have to spend $6 on a magnet. These are 8mm by 3mm thick. I get a dozen of them from Hobby Lobby for $4.
Yeah.
And they make the mini ones too, so I may pick some of those up the next time I'm there. And I don't know, I did have to make some concession on this to fit that back there without stepping the chassis. I don't know if you can see there, but you notice my motor shaft does not have anything to do with my gear nut.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm running spacers on the outside of the axles to take care of that.
Good.
These aren't the best gears, so I do get a little bit of that whine as it goes into a left-hander. But I think that's more an issue with the old gears. So that it did allow me to, I had to slide the motor forward a little bit, so it moved some of the weight back into the center of the chassis. And I have a feeling that might be one of the reasons I don't need as much magnet when the car really runs well. So,
You know, you keep working on the design, you may not need a magnet at all.
actually, I'm done with this one. If it's one of those things, if you keep going, I can take the design to the point that I screwed it up.
Yeah. Start another one.
I think it looks so cool, especially the way you've got the I don't know whether the rails, the way they cross over. I think it looks great.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to do
On
something.
the magnet note, as we speak, I'm pulling the magnets out of my ThunderSlot cars.
You can do it.
So that's for Chris. I started using the
Michael,
Polycar
touch your
F1
Put your
and
hand
taken
on
all
your
the magnets
forehead.
out of it, and I've used Greg's tip of using the scale auto tires on it, and it's okay.
Michael, you're off my Christmas.
If you
tree.
turn the voltage down to 11.5.
Michael, touch your forehead. Does it feel hot?
Did you?
Okay,
No,
altogether,
but it's attracted.
actually, Michael, altogether, we're just going to go say you've been healed.
So you're putting scale auto foam rubber tires on there? Did you?
Yep.
Did you get the scale auto cleaner to go with them?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what
Mike,
kind
as long as it's only one car, you're forgiven.
All right, what are you doing?
Oh,
What kind of foam?
I'm actually talking the other two guys that I race with on Mondays to reduce the magnetism. So you know, it's getting there.
As long as you're having fun.
Scale Electric track is like ice.
Have you been tested for COVID lately? I think you're running a fever.
I was gonna say, you're, good for you. You're reducing the drip, man. Eventually, you'll be off the sauce.
What kind of tires did you get? The reds or the yellows or the whites?
The whites.
Try the yellows. If you,
I don't know if he had the. You know what? It is the yellows. It's Pro 2, the number 2s. Pro Comp 2s.
I forget which number they are, but I think the yellow is the grippiest, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't remember.
The reds are definitely the harder one.
The red's the hardest.
Oh,
I think white is the middle and yellow
White might be the middle. Yeah, I think yellow is the softest.
Yeah. So yeah, those would be the ones to get out. And I'll tell you what, I've put too much tire cleaner on those things so many times. I'm gonna say, don't ever apply the tire cleaner directly to the tire without the tire in motion. Use the battery trick and just skim the surface of the tire with the cleaner, because the tire is a sponge pretty much, and the adhesive holding the tire to the wheel will soften with that cleaner. So don't over apply it. I cannot stress that enough. I thought I was not over applying it, and yet I was still over applying it. So now I will never ever apply the dauber directly to the tire. It's always battery to the braids, skim the surface of the tires, and that's it. Because otherwise the tire will literally just slip right off the wheel entirely, and you'll be.
Well, it hasn't yet.
Well, they're brand new, so that's so I'm pre-warning you. Keep the cleaner to an absolute bare minimum. And
I will take that into advisement.
I think
And not pay attention to it at all.
The reason that it happened to me a second time was because they were brand new tires and they just weren't getting any grip because they had never had any cleaner applied to them at all. And it was race night, so I was like, clean. I was putting that on all over the place. It didn't cause my tires to come off that night, but like a couple of races later, they just slipped right off. Okay, well, did it again. Good job, Greg.
I'll see what happens.
That's why Alan sells you that stuff, so he can sell you more tires.
You know what? Alan was the one. He literally went to. This was at Alan's track. That's where the race was when that happened to me. He took my car up to the back room and put new glue on the tires and slipped them back on. I was racing. And the car went, right? That's all I cared about. The car went. I didn't have to put a whole brand new set of wheels on just to get functional tires. But he slipped those foam rubber rings back on.
Wow.
Rather than say, okay, Greg, I'll sell you another set of wheels.
You could probably get the same effect with some suntan lotion eventually.
You know, it's rubber, right? So you just got to let it do its thing. And that's the problem.
We use WD-40.
Yeah,
Well,
WD-40. Pretty much any
really good.
pretty much any oil, and I think that's why we don't ever use an oil on the Skill Auto foam rubbers. I only ever use the tire cleaner, but I think
which is stuff like it's lacquer thinners. That's
Right.
Yeah, it's got oil in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Is Alan's track dry?
It is a dry track. Yeah. No adhesive. I assume by dry you mean no adhesives.
No spray.
Nothing. Yeah, the track is nothing ever gets put onto the track. It's all rubber from tire deposits.
It gets put onto the track, but it gets put onto the track via the tires.
By the tires, yeah. So the track has a nice blue groove in it.
I've seen Alan put wet cars down with wet tires often.
Yeah. The track itself is not wet. Sometimes the tires go on a little bit wet, but they dry up pretty quick.
Yeah.
But the track has just an S ton of grip. It's not a slippery track. You can pretty much drive it.
Well, first thing in the morning, it might be a little different to that.
True, cool, and with condensation, you gotta put the dryer
dust.
Got to put the dryer vehicles out on the track and get the.
I've seen that thing dusty and dirty.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, he's not going to run a tarp over it every time. He's got product on it half the time. Anyways, enough giving Alan a hard time. Anybody else got anything they want to show and tell? Topics? Oh, okay, Dennis, and then we'll get to Neil.
All right, so I'm going to start by changing my camera because I'm going to do this.
Oh, nice.
And
let me spotlight you.
Fancy production value here.
Yeah, look at that.
Well, it's just that it's a lot easier to show it this way because then I can see what I'm looking at, and you guys can see it. Okay, so this is the new RevoSlot Mercedes CLK.
Nice.
It's very nice. It's pretty. I mean, if you want to nitpick, you can nitpick.
Looks like you already did the mod to get it lower.
All right, so the mod that I did to get it lower is different to the mod that Alan has been talking about because I had a good look at the car and found out what the real problem is. What Alan's been telling everybody is to take the little rubber boots off the posts that mount the body, and that then drops the body down further on the chassis. But of course, it leaves the chassis still at the same height above the track. So what I did, and I can probably show you, I left the same the little rubber boots are still on the posts, but what I did was underneath the axle blocks, you could see there are some little flat aluminum washers at the front and the rear. If you go to the hardware store or to the home improvement store and you have a look in the aisle where all the pop rivets are, you can find a little aluminum washer that's a 332 diameter inside and about a quarter-inch outside diameter. And you buy a whole pack of them for a couple of bucks. And they work as brilliantly as spacers. And they're 0.4 of a millimeter thick. And so I have 3 under each screw in the front and 2 at the back. So I've raised the front axle 1.2 millimeters and I've raised the rear axle 0.8 millimeters. in order to do that, I had to use longer screws at the front because, you know, I just ran out of length of screw. The rears, the screws are still long enough. And what that does is it leaves the body and the chassis in the same relationship to each other that they always were, instead of dropping the chassis into the body. But it now has dropped the chassis closer to the ground and the body closer to the ground, right?
Yeah.
And so you have just a nice little bit of clearance all the way around, but the wheels are nicely in the center of the wheel arches.
Nice. I like that much better.
Well, you know, and
the RevoSlot uses standard axle blocks on all their cars that are all the same. I've noticed different coloured ones.
There are different coloured ones. Whether those are different sizes or not, I'm not sure. I would hope so, but they may not be. You know, there may be. I haven't researched it. There may be other axle blocks that I could get. In fact, what I could have done was to use the rear axle blocks on the front, and then just space up and get another set of rears and space them up a little bit, because the rear axle blocks on the front would be almost perfect in terms of the amount that you need to move it up.
Washers
anyway. Sorry, say again?
Washers are cheap.
Washers are very cheap, and it wasn't a difficult thing. And I happened to have some of those little black screws. Those were, I think, Plafford screws that I used up the front.
It's a shame they didn't notice this in pre-production.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what happened.
Wouldn't be surprised if something changed between pre-production and you know,
actual
the production run. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll find out eventually, no doubt. But anyway, I just thought I'd let you guys know that's the one way to do it.
So what size are they again, Dennis?
At the front, I raised it by 1.2 millimeters, and at the rear, I raised it by 0.8 of a millimeter. And the reason for that is that at the little washers that I used are 0.4 millimeters thick. So I used 3 at the front and 2 at the back.
And they're what, 332 internal?
332 inside and about 6 millimeter outside.
Okay, cool.
So instead of lowering the bridge, you raise the water.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, kind of. Or put it this way, instead of raising the bridge, I lowered the water.
You'd think a guy who owned a 3D printer would have just made some axle blocks.
I was just gonna say, if you got a 3D printer, you can just print a couple.
Well, to print axle blocks out of aluminum,
no, shims.
Not that easy.
I mean the shims. Like I could print 1.2 millimeter shims and then 0.8
I guess I could. But when you're sitting here,
the problem with the plastic is that it compresses.
Yeah.
And that changes the alignment on the front end with the ball bearings on it.
I mean,
so you want to have a hard surface to do that.
Sure. You know.
Ask me how I know.
How do you know, Mike?
I tried it.
In the long run, what I probably
the screws in so tight.
In the long run, what I probably will do is to actually cut some little brass shims and square so that they're the same size as the block, and drill them out, and so that it looks really good. But this was my quickest adjustable way of finding out whether it would work or not. And so it's really good because now, as I said, the relationship of the chassis to the body is the same, instead of the front and rear of the chassis and the body are very, very close to each other. So you don't want to be moving that too much up and down.
Right.
Didn't leave you with any guide depth issues then, I take it.
I don't on a wooden track, no.
I was just going to bring up the track issue. You know, do you have a piece of Ninco you can slap that on? Because you know,
I've already put the deep guide on this one because I know that my track can handle it.
Yeah.
But there is probably if you use the stock guide with the stock spring, there's more than 1.2 millimeters of travel on that spring anyway.
Ah, spring.
Mm-hmm.
Not having won one of those cars in a recent competition, I don't actually have a RevoSlot.
Just go buy one, Wayne. Jeez. Or watch all of the videos and let all the ads play multiple times and
That's
help
what I do.
boost my income there.
Now I've got something else to show you guys.
Okay.
I've been doing some restorations for a friend of mine who is a collector and bought a whole bunch of cars. And he bought this box of cars from a guy whose father had raced back in the day, and brought them to me. And they're pretty much stock 1967 or so hand-built slot cars, right? But so it's a scratch-built chassis underneath. This one made from it's some kind of maybe a steel brazing rod or something. I don't think that it's piano wire. Because it doesn't really solder very well. But anyway, I cleaned it all up. But the absolutely beautiful thing about these cars are the bodies, right? Because the guy did such a good job of detailing the bodies. I don't know if you can see there in the
Dennis, are they Lancer? Is that a Lancer body?
they are butyrate, so they probably are Lancer, either Lancer or Rusket. I think this might be a Rusket.
I think, well,
it's a McLaren, an M1B McLaren anyway. But what the guy's done, right, is put this little spoiler up the front and actually has cut a hole in the here, and the whole thing has ducting on the inside. Let me take the body off, because he's put all this ducting on the inside. It's really cool.
Can someone help me out with what butyrate is? Is that table tennis ball? Or?
No, butyrate is the plastic that was used before PETG and before Lexan.
yeah, horrible stuff.
Not familiar with
So
it at all.
you can see inside there's all this old masking tape right now, right? But he cut this diaplane, this front spoiler, right back, and so it actually channels the air through here and out the top of the body, right? And he cut away the back here and put some mesh in there and some little aluminum pipes in the back for exhausts. And the rear spoiler is actually held on with little pins that look like rivets.
It's a wonder he didn't put a little cooling duct for the driver.
Yep, yeah, he did a great job on this thing. They really did. There's a bunch of them. I mean, there's like 6 or 7 of these cars in the box.
So Dennis, was this a West Coast racer then?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know who he was. This is the second one that I've just finished doing. I don't know who he was, and the guy who bought all this collection doesn't know either. Or he does, but the name didn't ring a bell and didn't sound like anybody's particularly famous. But here's another one. Same thing with the scoops up the front. Same body, slightly different chassis. This one. Gorgeous, this one's still ready to be restored. It's dirty. The braids
but considering the age, it's in very good
considering the age, they're absolutely gorgeous, and the bodies are fantastic. I don't think I've ever seen bodies as good as this on old cars like these. They obviously were not used much. Here's an old, it's a vac-formed Dino. This has got the Cox magnesium wheels on it that have corroded to glory and back. And this one is really dirty and gruddy. I've got quite a bit of work to do on here. All of them with modified rewound 16D motors in them. This one's wheels were also these are the Cox Lotus wheels. And Chris will remember this. You see how wide the rear tires are? It's actually 2 wheels screwed onto a threaded axle together, with the center ribs taken away, and then a full width. They're like 800, just 7/8 of an inch wide nearly at the back.
Can you hold up the McLaren again, Dennis?
The red one?
Yeah. I just want to. Okay. See, I don't think That's a rusket body. I don't know. I'm just gonna put a quick shot up here quickly.
Okay.
And you can see what you have.
Yeah, you're probably right. That is probably a Lancer, don't you think?
No, this is a rusket.
No, I meant the one that Dennis had.
Well, it could be. I was just looking at the recess around the intakes, and I think the one Dennis has is a little. It looks a bit. You know, it's hard to tell from here, but that's an original rusket, which now has a proper interior in it. That was just an interior I made a while ago.
So then, if it's not an original rusket, it would have to be a Lancer, because I don't think anybody else made anything that was of this quality at that point.
Yeah, no.
Did they vacuum form this material?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting that they've got a re-entrant shape with the curve in the sides.
Yeah, you could do that with butyrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get, plus don't forget, I mean, the mold makers were really, really good. They got such a nice undercut on those bodies.
Yeah, but they had tricks, right? I mean, they would mold all of this, right? But if you see the body when it's on the mold, it probably has these little extensions at the wheel arches.
Right.
And then what they would do is they would actually cut the body in those pieces of scrap plastic so that it would stretch enough to get it off the mold.
Yeah, back in the day, Wayne, Lancer made everything, every single, like every possible body you could ever imagine.
Never heard of them.
Lancer? Oh,
God.
Well, my experience with slot cars is only a couple of years, as well as what I did, as a child. But
for a mere pittance, we can sell you a book that's called Slot Car Dreams.
Yes.
A mere pittance being $120. But
I'm going to ask my library if they can get a copy in for me.
Anyway, okay, so that's my stuff for the day.
That kind of reminds me of something that Ed was talking about with me privately. Did you guys enjoy the Slot Cars and Happiness presentation that he gave us last week?
Absolutely.
I certainly did. I thought it was
yeah.
He as he mentioned last week, he's done several other slot car related presentations with based on other topic, other themes, I guess you could say, but on slot cars, right? And he was asking me if we'd like to see other presentations, and personally, I would say absolutely, and I kind of assume that you guys are with me on that. So anytime Ed wants to do another one of his presentations, I'm on board with that. Not right now, obviously, but we'll let him prepare in advance whatever he wants to do. Neil had a thing that he wanted to show and tell or ask. Go ahead, Neil. What you got?
I actually have two things.
Okay.
This thing here, if you can see that.
You hold it in front of yourself or turn off your virtual background. There you go. Is that the Carrera?
Yeah, this is the Carrera. And the problem I have, I just took it out of the box, and it just constantly hops out of the groove.
Just all by itself, not you pulling the trigger or anything.
Well, I mean, no. Yeah, I'm definitely pulling the trigger, but I mean, I'm not giving it hardly any kind of speed in the turns, and it just pops out.
Let's see the bottom of it.
Yeah, typical Carrera. You might have to turn off your virtual background.
Yeah, if I
Look where that guide's located. Blimey.
Yeah.
That's Carrera.
Yeah, that's the way Carrera do it, but it'll be bad rear tires more than anything else.
You think?
Yeah, because I have two of those.
Well, no, I haven't, but I can change them. The other thing I was going to ask was about putting weight in the front, but that has nothing to do with it hopping out, though, probably, right?
Well, I mean,
fix the tires first.
Put it bottom up and let's see how the braids are.
Yeah, upside down, completely upside down.
Sorry.
I think, Neil, the big problem is the independent front wheels. They wobble and all over the front. I've actually, I've got the blue and white one, not blue and yellow. Sorry, Greg. And I've just sort of put a solid axle through them. I had to change the wheels because trying to get the bearings / stub axles out of those front ones is just a real pain. You know, it was more than a real pain.
Magnet in that, Neil?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you mean it like just pops out in a straight line, or just isn't
No. It's going into the turn, and as it comes out, it just pops right out. It just keeps.
When you're entering the turn or when you're leaving the turn?
When I'm leaving the turn, it won't stay in the groove.
I mean, if you've got 4 brushes on that thing. You can cut the 2 rear ones off if you want, which may put a little more pressure on, because those are pretty bloody stiff braids.
Yeah, you gotta flatten those down so the front end
flatten those down. You could try cutting the rears off, spin the front axle.
It's got 2 axles.
Yeah, it's stub axles.
Are they both free spinning?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're independent too.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing if they're all round and true and nice and all the rest of the stuff.
Are his front tires of a diameter? Are his front tires of a diameter that's lifted his guide out the slot? Could they need to be smaller?
Yeah, when you put it on,
you could try driving the car without the front tires on at all. Pop the front tires right off the wheels, and then drive the car and see what happens. But the first thing I would do, looking at that car, is I would use some lighter fluid on a rag, and I would clean those rear tires so that they're actually got some grip, because they look awful to me.
They are awful.
Those skunk stripes on the rear tires don't look good.
No.
I think Chris is probably onto something with the braids, and I noticed that that doesn't appear to be a center magnet, or it wasn't showing through the chassis. Is there a magnet in front of the motor?
No. Yes, that's where the magnet is, right in front of the motor.
Oh, there's 2. There's one in front.
Then there's 2, because I saw one behind the motor.
Yeah, the front one doesn't protrude through the chassis.
Okay, so you got 2 magnets, one in front and one behind the motor.
Standard Carrera.
That's what I was thinking, but I didn't see it protruding from the chassis, so I kind of figured. But yeah, flatten those braids as much as possible so that the front end isn't being held up. And maybe, I don't know, if you want to pull the rear magnet so that it's basically not helping it wheelie up by pulling down.
What about a deeper guide too, maybe?
It's not the depth of the guide. Carrera guides are big and long and deep. It's not the depth of the guide.
What track are you running? Are you running Carrera track?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, then
I would take the
Carrera
front
guide is
tires
good.
off. I would take the front tires off and try it without the front tires. See if it still does the same.
See what happens, yeah. And cutting the rear piece of braid off, so you've only got the front one that's folded back. So it's not so much upward springiness of the braids.
Well, what about
a little weight in the front?
What about redoing the braids so that
shift them forward so that you've got a long front one.
Make it just long.
You can do that now.
Instead of having
They don't need to be any longer, Neil.
Yeah,
they don't.
Having great big long braids is nothing.
Okay.
The first thing I would do is get some lighter fluid on a rag, as Dennis said, clean the rear tires, put it on the track, see what happens.
Okay.
Clean the rear tires again, take the front tires off.
Okay.
And see what happens. And then sort of let us know, and we'll take it from there.
He could do that before the end of the show.
I really don't want to tell you to bugger around with the car too much if it's like a stupidly simple thing.
Okay.
Yeah, just cleaning. But wouldn't giving more grip to the back tires exacerbate the problem?
Well, yes, and that's why I asked, like, what does it pop out in the straights or pop out in the corners or?
No, it pops
coming out of the turn. Yeah, so it's when he's coming out of the turn into the straight that it's accelerating, that it's lifting and coming out of the slot.
Right out, yeah.
Yeah, in which just scrunch the braid down as flat as you can on the bottom of the guide. Try that. you know, if your rear tires are dirty, it's probably not going to force the car out. It's just going to make the rear end slide all over the place.
Right.
The other thing I've done with mine, Neil, I've gone the whole hog and replaced the Carrera guide set up with one of the CG adapter type things, so that you can use a conventional guide there, not a Carrera guide. You know, they just plug into the hole in the chassis. It moves the guide post forward, which means you can put the solid axle through without you know, fouling the guide post.
So I could change the independent front to an axle.
You can you can do anything you want, but try the easy, no cost stuff first.
Yep.
And that'll give you a good idea. You can replace the motor, the gears, the wheels, the tire. Like you can do anything you want, and we can tell you how to do that. But do the easy stuff first.
Do you already have some spare braid, like for slotted or other types of cars?
Yeah.
So if you could probably, I'm sure you have some spare plug-in braids for Carrera cars. So what I would do is take the braids that are on that car, since they've already been used, pull those braids out, and then gently pry up the brass that's holding the braid in, and replace the braid with softer braid, and then crimp the brass back down so that you don't have two things of braid. So you're using one thing of folded back braid that's soft braid, you know, for good slot cars, and then you're not having to change the guide system or anything else, and then you can just plug those right back in. So you've got thinner, softer, single braids doing their job rather than those big, heavy, springy Carrera braids.
Do you have a piece of track handy, Neil?
I do. Hold on.
See how much it springs up?
Or see where it is, period. Like where.
I think what I'd like
Solutions
to
to
see
try.
is get two cars, put one on the piece of track, and then start tilting the track so the car's uphill, and keep doing it and see if it just, like, there's a huge wing in the back of the thing. Maybe it's just going to do a wheelie because of all the rear weight.
Well, he's got both those magnets on there too.
That wing is overcompensating for something.
Okay, is the body on it? Like, can you take the body off easy, Neil, or no? Okay. Now you look. You look at it from the front. Turn it around so the front's facing you. Both tires on the track, yes or no?
Front tires?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And how much space is there between the bottom of the plastic guide blade and the track?
Space filled by the braid.
You mean the bottom of the braid?
No, that's
when it's standing on its wheels.
Advance the car so far, move the car so far forward on the track that you can look in the slot and see the guide
Or
blade.
just press down and see how much the rear tires, the rear wheels pick up.
We're wanting to see the gap between the bottom of the guide and the bottom of the slot.
Yeah, there's not much.
Okay, so it looks with the front wheels on the ground, it looks like the guide blade is 75 to 80% down the way in the slot.
Yes.
Okay, that's, you know,
not it then.
That's not a big issue. I mean, you could have completely out around front wheels and tires.
Stub axle front wheels is what it is, I bet.
Well, it's not helping.
I mean, if the McLaren that I have is anything to go by, no.
None of them are good, but
I
that
mean,
doesn't look bad at all.
There's nothing there, Neil, that says like fix this.
Right. That's why I was wondering. It was like, usually when you take something out of the box, it always has some type of issues, but they always seem to run pretty good. And this one was like, oh my goodness, what the heck is wrong?
Okay, with the body on, do any of the fenders take the car off the track? And then with the body sort of firmly on, do the front wheels bind on any of the wheel wells or anything?
No.
Okay.
I was also thinking maybe when the body is on and screwed down, something's getting tweaked.
Well, it can, yeah, you don't want to reef the whole.
No, it's all good.
You know, sometimes if one of those hits a fender well or something and grabs halfway through a corner, it can cause some pretty funky behavior. So.
Okay, well, I'll do those things that you told me to do.
When
And, we'll see how that works out.
When you put the body back on,
what's going on?
I'm definitely gonna clean the tires.
Body back on, put it back on a setup block or a piece of track just to make sure that the body being screwed to the chassis isn't twisting something in as a result of that. Just holding the body and the chassis together isn't going to show you that. But if you put the screws in and screw them tight, you might see that one of the front wheels lifts up, and so it just means you got to back off one of the screws so that it straightens back out.
Right.
Why don't you run it without the body on it for a few laps?
Yeah.
I tried that. That didn't help.
Okay. Well, there's the answer to that.
And the last question.
I did try that.
And the last question is: Did you make a note of whether it was left turns only or right turns only or both directions?
No, I didn't make a note of that. But to tell you the truth, it would be left. I think it would be mostly lefts.
Well, it doesn't help us, but it might show you that there is a twist somewhere or a tire that's not on the track or something.
Or the right wheel is the problem.
Yeah. I think I should take it.
We've got some homework to do, and we're expecting a full report next week.
Exactly.
No problem.
For sure. What was the other thing?
The other thing was, since you got me, you got my.
He's got broken glasses.
Yeah.
Those things freak me out.
Yeah. You guys got me to clean my track up, and so I could run. So now I know that this doesn't work. But I also, Harry Wise from Home Racing World is having a showdown, winter showdown, and I'm going to do my first build of a brass chassis for a 1/25th scale NASCAR hard body.
Yep.
1959 to 1964.
Yeah.
He does a really simple chassis, but I was just wondering if Chris or Dennis could just email me a picture of a chat, not a complicated chassis, but just a simple chassis that will just run fairly well. I didn't want to do exactly what Harry does. You know what I mean?
Well, Harry builds all of his chassis out of square brass tube.
Yes.
Don't do that. Make it out of piano wire.
I have plenty of that.
Yeah, the car flexes and has memory and goes back straight and does a whole bunch of other cool things. But yes, we can help you with a design.
Yeah, just a design, just something I can, try to mimic or build.
Yeah, Dennis and I will. You can buy off-the-shelf motor brackets, JK motor brackets, and
I have that.
other things.
Yep, I have all that stuff that Harry suggests you use to build.
Yeah.
But I don't particularly like his square tubing, and I'd rather just do a flat brass, if that was the case, you know what I mean?
Piano wire, man.
Or
piano
wire. So
I think piano wire.
I can build anything if you give me a halfway decent picture. I can build it.
Well, I mean, the basic design that Harry and a few of the guys has, it's just a single rail design with a motor bracket well soldered in between.
And I don't want to get kicked out of the thing. I just wanted to build something instead of using square. I wanted to use either piano wire or brass tubing or something, or just flat brass. You know what I mean?
Use piano wire.
Yep, piano wire.
Yeah.
And
Chris said piano wire. Use piano wire.
Okay. We race hard bodies out at Blaney Park Raceway.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Keith Kanaka has a web page called D3 Hard Body Racing, And within the D3 Hard Body Racing webpage are several cars that were made by people that race out there. And they have a step-by-step tutorial on how to build a chassis. Now, they are the ones with the, I think people call them floppy chassis, where the outriggers move up and down. But that would give you some great ideas on how to build a 1/25th scale or 1/24th scale chassis.
Yeah, you might want to build an inline though, rather than the sidewinder.
It has to be an inline.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a few little differences between building a chassis that's running on a glue track with sponge tires and building a chassis that's running on hard tires.
Yeah. And they're using some pretty anemic motor as well, aren't they?
Yeah,
it's only like 17 and a half or 18.
Yeah, the jaws.
18.
So you don't want to build it too heavy.
Right. But that would give him some ideas of what other people.
Sure. I'm just looking for a photo of one that I built a while back.
And I think they're using Paul Gauge urethane tires.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that reminded me of a question I had. Are MJK urethanes?
Yes.
Okay, thought so.
Hurrah.
I have a question if you're ready to move to a new mind
Sure.
space.
I think Dennis is going to show a chassis, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'll let you know when I find it.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Okay, so I've been fighting in my own head recently with the concept of longer guide leads, and guide lead is a flexible term, it seems. Some people discuss it with relation to the front axle, and most seem to discuss it with relation to the rear.
Correct.
And some also include the track width of the contact patches, the outside edges of the contact patches, but I'll put that to one side for the moment. And its relationship to weight distribution, front and rear. And I know that in the past, the discussion has led to somewhere in the region of a 60-40 weight distribution is acceptable, is a working starting point. But I wondered how far reasonably you could expect a car still to function when the weight goes further back by the effect of moving the guide further forward. Because in my head, that puts whatever weight there is on the back, it increases that because the guide's moved forward, and it puts it in a longer pendulum. And those two things are negatives for my way of thinking. And I wondered how far back you could reasonably go with a CG and still expect the car to work well.
And this is what are you thinking of build? What are you trying to build here, or is this just like a hypothetical thing?
No, it's not a hypothetical. I've actually got a car in my possession that is different to anything else I've ever used or built. And I'm talking about a plastic 3D printed chassis where the guide has been put right behind the front bumper of the car. And what it's left me with is a car with no lead in it that's got a 70%, 30% weight distribution to the rear. And I wondered if that is too much in the back.
There's no 60-40 is a thing that sort of cars end up at. I wouldn't plan that from the outgo. So build your chassis, design your chassis, put it on the track, and it'll let you know what it wants. And then you can, do the weight accordingly. For most 30-second scale stuff, we're
talking plastic hard body here with
the track is fairly wide open. It's fairly tight.
It's sectional plastic that the car's intended to function on, actually Ninko, which is bumpy.
But is it all R1 corners, or is it?
Oh no. No, it's pretty big, and it can have some R4 radius long turns and stuff.
Okay.
So
in that case, for a 30-second scale car, under most bodies, as long a guide lead as you can get is not going to be a big problem.
Well, that's what it's got. It's got as long as it can be under the body shell.
Yeah, when you get to really short, tight, twisty club tracks, a shorter a shorter guide lead, and guide lead from a slot car perspective is from the center line of the rear axle to the center line of the guide flag post.
And I agree. That's how it is in my head. It's the discussion of having how far away is it from the front it's not new for me to think about, but I think I mean, the very best, I'm going to say, cars that don't fit into this category. By that, I mean things like the flexi cars that don't have front wheels. Well, they actually have their outrigger skids virtually in line with the guide, don't they? They're right forward.
They do, but the biggest difference between cars like that is a 24 scale car has a larger physical measurements to it, and the biggest thing is sponge tires.
Yeah, I realize it's totally different.
Right, the outside car of a sponge tire car will compress, leaving both rear wheels. So the inside tire will be a bigger diameter than the outside tire as it compresses, keeping both tires on the ground. With hard tires, and I'm classifying silicone, rubber, and urethane as hard tires, that does not happen. The compression rate's basically zero on these things because they just go so bloody slow around corners.
So the characteristic of the car when it's driven is that it's a little tail happy. And it seems to be quite forgiving in terms of not deslotting, but the back end is out more than I want it to be. And I cannot get away.
The guide lead.
Yeah, you can shorten the guide lead.
It's longer than any other plastic chassis car that I've got. I actually know the numbers, but they don't, they don't mean anything particularly.
Yeah.
It's just that, you see, you've got 100% lateral grip given to you at the front by the guide. So you can put as much weight as you like, almost lateral grip, lateral load into the front end because the guide will keep it in. We'll make sure it turns. But when you're asking the back of the car to take, when you're asking the back two tires to take care of, I don't know, 45 grams or 50 plus grams of lateral load, yeah, okay, you've got that weight on the back that you require for forward traction. But when it comes to the corner and that wants to swing around, I just don't seem to be able to keep the back of the car pointing forward. It wants to swing, it wants to swing around too much.
Can you adjust the guide lead?
Not without changing the nature of the print.
Okay. For any given track, there's an ideal guide lead with tires and all the rest of the stuff. So a longer guide lead will track better. It'll be smoother and nicer on wide radius corners. A shorter guide lead will transition much quicker through tight, quicker corners. So you need to sort of look at your track and go from there.
This 70, and I'm weighing the back and the front from the rear axle to the guide, ignoring the front tires completely. So I believe I'm measuring that correctly. Is 70% on the back too much, or is that a workable amount?
No, 70 is too much.
Yeah.
So we would be attempting to reduce that then.
Yeah.
What motor are you using?
It's an S-Can. It's in a sidewinder configuration. And most of them, as you know, my slot car collection and the cars that I race are very basic, very close to stock, mostly non-podded. And this one's podded. So it's got a lot of things in it that are different, but
well, then you basically need to play with weight. I was thinking if you had an FK 180 motor, you could swap in an S-Can motor and save yourself 12 grams. But that's
yeah.
So,
all right. What can you do with tire compounds? What are you allowed to do?
There are two tire compounds. They perform very, very similarly, and that's the two that you're allowed to use, and that's the end of it.
Okay. How much adjustment do you have across of the width of the rear end?
You are maximum 63 millimeters, and you tend to choose a body shell that's got that, because I think your wheel arches are meant to cover your tires.
So what I was thinking is, I was wondering whether you could make it narrower at the rear.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Try that.
Well, okay.
Pull the tires in as close as you can, and see what happens.
That raises the center of gravity and
No, it doesn't.
Hmm?
No, it doesn't.
If you narrow, sure it does. It changes the whole base of your triangle.
It changes the
does
triangle.
not raise the center of gravity. It cannot raise the center of gravity. It can
Literally,
change all
the
kinds of
CD
other
doesn't
things, but
move.
it cannot raise the center of gravity.
But it will have a similar effect to a raised CD.
Ah, that's a different issue.
Yeah, that's the difference between what Chris is saying and what I think he means.
Okay.
Because I understand Chris's point of view. It's that you make the base of the triangle smaller by narrowing the rear width.
Yeah.
So it's a taller triangle, which is similar to
It's
raising
not. It's
the
a longer
CG.
triangle. It's just a narrower triangle. It's not a longer one or a taller one.
I think he means between the rear wheels and the center of gravity.
Yeah, it becomes.
That way.
You got a wider triangle, but if you're got a narrow.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
Agreed.
I can try rear track and play with rear track width. I might try that.
I would put some weight up the front of the car too.
Yeah.
Well, is there any need to do it when you're not wheeling out the slot? I mean,
Yeah,
what
if
will
you're
it-
trying to get rid of 70% of the weight on the rear tires.
Well, that's easy to do. I mean, you can stick a whole load of weight in the front of the car potentially, and you will get a different front to rear ratio. But you're still trying to control 50 plus grams with the back two tires.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the issue.
Well, there's one way to find out.
Put some weight up front.
Put some lead up front.
Everything in this game is empirical to start with. All that we ever do is we invent all kinds of engineering explanations for what our empirical experiments tell us, right? And sometimes our engineering explanations agree with the empirical results, and then we know that the engineering explanation is good. And sometimes the engineering explanation does not agree with the empirical results, and then we know that the engineering explanation is bad. That's the way it works.
Making my brain hurt.
I'll tell you what, that sounds precisely the same as science.
Of course, it is science.
Did you find a picture of a chassis for us, Dennis?
No, all the ones that I've got are angle winders.
No worries. I think that's probably a good note to end the recording on. We've only got a couple minutes left. And does anybody have anything they want to toss in for Wayne on his topic of triangularities? Seeing none or hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. But you guys can absolutely keep chatting on that. And I'm sure some of you will keep chatting for hours and hours. But for now, we'll say bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.